Hello there, good morning, and welcome to my little corner of the internet. This morning, it's art time because that's what I do. There may be chats, and I may decide to go on to a speeded up version afterwards, but who knows? I shall see how this works out. This is a drawing. Well, I did the drawing a day or so before, but yesterday I decided to add colour to it. And I thought, yeah, okay, I've got the watercolour media going on and everything else, and I thought I just want to see what would happen if I used alcohol markers. And I used my set of chameleons. Chameleons are really interesting. They look like this, if you haven't seen them before, and you have a brush tip at one end. And it's a bit different to a Copic or another brush tip. It actually spreads out at the tip a lot more. It is a bit more like a brush in some ways. There's a bullet tip on the other end. Now I do like a bullet tip for colouring, drawing, whatever. And then the top here is what's known as a mixing chamber. And this is filled with colourless blender solution, blender ink. And it means that I can pop this on the top of, I'll show you. So I happen to have some paper here. You just move that across because this will go through. Pop this on the top for, you can see, I don't know if you can see where the pen tip and the blending solution tip meets. Hold it upright for anywhere as long as you feel you need to. It depends on the area you're colouring in and how much of a fade that you want. And then you colour. Hopefully you can see. That it fades from, in this case, colourless to full strength colour. And that means that creating gradients of colour, bleeds of colour are great. But the other thing that they have, which is fantastic, is sets of these colour tops. So these are the equivalent of the colourless blender, except they've got colour in them. And again, you add this to the pen you want to use, hold it upright for a little bit, and then this is that brown colour, and you can see it beginning to change from brown into a greeny brown, and then to this olive green colour, which is what the original colour of the pen is, of the bottom pen. And apparently you can stack colours as well, so you can add, I could have started with a colourless blender or done it the other way around, so brown with the green on and then the colourless blender, and I could have faded from one to the other. That's a bit too complex for me to get my head round, especially first thing in the morning. But I love the Chameleon pens, and let me make it quite plain and clear. I'm not paid or sponsored or gifted products in any kind of way to mention this. I really am not. These are things I've bought for myself. In fact, I was in, and these came from the original crowdfunder Kickstarter campaign, as did the colour tops, because as soon as I saw them, I knew they were something that I would like. I had sets of Spectrum Noir, Pro markers. I've got a full set of the Copic Chows, not the big Copics. And out of all of the alcohol markers I've ever had, I find the Chameleons the easiest to work with. Copics have got their strong points. I've got a wider range of colours with Copics, and they do work. I think they do blend in with the Chameleons. So I mean, there is that about it, but the infinite number of colours you can get with Chameleons is lovely. So what I did here, I'll just move that out the way a moment, was I used some of the more vintagey tones, and of course the background colour will show through alcohol ink because alcohol ink is transparent, and so the background colour of the paper will mute the colours so that I get a more vintagey, grungy look. But I chose cornflower blue, which is the main part of the blue. This is olive green, No other, and I occasionally used a different colour with the blues and browns, that's it. Otherwise it was the colourless blender, so it would fade out. This is some of the more reddy colours are cinnamon. The darker browns are burnt umber. This one here was taupe, I think. The green here, that was dark sage. I think that was the only colours. Yeah, it was the only colours that I used in this. And once it had all dried and settled, you can see I've added embellishments. I've added to some places the clear glaze with used souffle pens and some of the moonlight jelly rolls. So I've got white dots, I've got some yellowy green dots here. Along here I've got actually a green colour from the moonlight pens, which is akin to that olive green. And I like this. In fact, as I was doing it, I was thinking this feels so much more like digital art, digital colouring than anything else. And I know I do well with digital colouring. And so my brain is thinking, what do I do now? I've got all of these other media here. Do I stick to this? Do I stick to that? No, I'll keep on exploring and trying. But this was so lovely to do. And I'm really, for me, I'm really pleased with this. So expect to see more like this. The chameleons are refillable if you're interested. In fact, the full set I bought came with a full set of inks to refill, and yesterday I did my first refills after they must have been in my stash for 3-4 years. I've had them that long, and it was so easy to do. Even there was one bark had become gungy and dry, so I swapped the brush nib out because the set comes with replacement nibs, but the nibs that come are brush nibs and the nibs for inside the colourless blenders, but not bullet nibs, which surprised me. So I swapped that out, swapped the brush nib out on the bark and refilled it with a little bit more ink than they recommend, because it was obviously dried. I don't know why or how, because the lids are always put on really tightly. Just one of those things, and it worked fine. The brush nib did. It'll take a while for the alcohol ink to dissolve whatever had gunged up the brush nib, the bullet nib. So I don't know what you think, but I really like that. So something else for me to work with going forward. Whoosh, we'll take that to one side. And this is a drawing that I did Sunday into yesterday, and I thought I'd really like to add colour to this. The binding on the sketchbook was getting in the way of my hand and making it awkward for me, because with alcohol markers I do need to turn around so I can move the gradient in the right direction. But I love these lovely warm, rusty almost, or coppery tones that are down here, and I've added some of that olive green in, which surprises me. I like it. And down here there's more golden tones in here, and it just works. The distress inks don't move with it because they're not alcohol based, they're water based. They don't seem to affect the nibs in any kind of way, or the ink. The only thing is that the fine detail I did was with the Signo DX 0.38, and that will move a little bit. Some of the pigment seems to move with the alcohol markers. It's hardly noticeable. But the other pen, which I think I used no, I didn't use a Uniball eye. I used a Unipin pen, I think. That's fine. It doesn't move, doesn't shift in any kind of way. So I'm going to do some colouring this morning and chat for a little bit and see where we go. My problem is that I just never quite know what it is I want to do here, or colours to use. I've got a really scuzzy piece of paper over here that I was putting test swatches on, but I need to do some swatches of these colours. But it's always interesting to see how things happen. Let me have a look here at this one. Ooh, a bit bright. I was looking at one of the oranges, and I know the oranges on here are really, really bright. I don't want to use pinks, so let me have a look. We use the Y03. Y03 is Warm Sunset, and it's a lovely warm yellowy orange, as the name suggests, and it's just fab for doing all kinds of things with. I might actually need to leave it to just pop some more with the colours blender. And it gives that instant highlight as well with the colourless blender, which is what I do like. And these will work as ordinary markers, so you don't have to do it this way, mixing chambers. Mixing chambers do make it so much more easy in many ways. So, you know, there's options with them. Not that I'm trying to sell you them at all. This is just, they're just ones that I really enjoy using. And I don't use often enough. I do have to say that. I don't drag them out of my stash often enough. I really don't. Now then, that original one didn't get really very dark, so I am just going to go back over them all the ones I've done so far, and just add some more colour there into the shadows. That's interesting, because this happens sometimes, is that you don't get enough of the colourless blender in. There's a rattly old lorry going down the hill. You get that a few times a day here. I don't know where it comes from or where it's going. I suspect from farms. I can see the DX is beginning to move on here, even though it's had even longer drying time. But it's okay, it is what it is. And when I add my embellishing dots, that means I will disguise those smears in some way. I'll make use of them and work it through. This is a really nice, I just love being able to do this. And stacking colours does appeal to me, the idea of it. So you can fade from one colour into 2, 3, 4, however it may be. It's very clever. I know they're not everybody's cup of tea, because everybody, it does seem a bit of a faff that you have to stop and put the mixing chamber on in between. But I find it's no less fussy than swapping pens around to get a blend, because I'd have to use 2 or 3 pens, I think, to get a blend like this with traditional markers, whereas here it works quite nicely just as it is. Now then, just check that's okay there. For the inside here, I do want a slightly darker colour, so this is where, have a look. Go use a carrot. This is caramel I'm going to use. And the lovely thing about this is that if I need it a bit more yellowy, I can just add the yellow over the top. But I'm just going to do the same kind of thing. Hopefully this will be just that little bit darker. Don't want it too dark, but darker. So there's pauses in between, but they're not very long. And I do think these moments of just waiting to add colour aren't as long as they may feel when you first use these pens. And just like any other alcohol marker, if you want to intensify the colour, you just go over it with another layer of the same colour. Or you can do the blend, the way that people blend alcohol markers like Copics, by putting the colours, the light colour down, then the medium as far as you want, then the darker colour, and then go backwards, so you use the medium colour to blend the darker colour, and then you use the light colour to blend them all. It takes a while to blend. It depends, and you can go from dark to light and back to dark if you wish. Everybody finds their own way of working, but this cuts out all of that. The only thing I do occasionally is just go in and use just the pure colour just to darken that up. But this isn't as yellowy as I'd hoped for, but that's okay. In fact, that's picked up a lot of that ink, which is a bit of a pain, but it's fine. It's not as yellowy as I'd hoped for, so if I go back to my mellow yellow, wasn't it? Then I can use that here to add yellow to all of them, and the underlying brown will still show through, so it's adding that, and it didn't take that long. They look quite golden. I'm really chuffed with that. My problem is now remembering what colours I used for that. It's fine. Okie dokes, let's have a look. These here. Now I would like a splash perhaps of a different colour. I could use that cornflower blue, blue again, that we saw in the other. Dark sage is a bit too bright green. This is an interesting colour I've put in my possible palette here. Is this blue-green. It's called Lagoon. And it's a quite a dullish colour. It's more, I don't know, it's more like an evergreen green, I suppose. Could say. But I think that might work out quite nicely here, to be honest. And something a little bit different, a little bit of a change. So a bit of variation doesn't harm anybody, really. So yesterday was a day where I was very tired, but I didn't get to nap because I forgot I had a delivery, and that was right in the middle of nap time, and by the time that came I was well into colouring the previous picture I showed you and about to start on this one, and so I just worked through it and with it. And kept myself awake until bedtime. I still feel tired today, but not as bad as yesterday. And I do have things to do later today. I've got to go and pick up a click and collect grocery order between 1 and 2 this afternoon, and I've got an online meditation class to go to at about a meditation group kind of about 3 o'clock this afternoon. So that's my day nicely packaged up, and I think I've got another one this evening, which is lovely. And I'm doing my best not to nap today because I do want to get to bed earlier today, because I know I'm up early on a Wednesday for my grocery delivery from Abel and Cole, which is fine. It all works its way through. So I am hoping that, I'm not hoping, I will be going out for a walk before I go to Tesco's, so somewhere around midday I expect. I'll get myself sorted and I'll go for a wander around the cemetery, perhaps a little bit afterwards, but it'd be quite nice. Those have worked out quite nice there, because this is quite a verdigris-ish kind of colour, I suppose. So it fits in. But say, I think the background does show through a lot and does mute everything down. So this is much more of a bluer green rather than the yellowy bluey green there. So I'm discovering that the distress ink backgrounds are really useful for this. And this is similar to what I do use in digital art. Is sometimes I'll use colours, but I make that layer sort of transparent to the bottom layer and add to it in a certain way, either multiplying the colours or adding the colours together. That sort of does. Or linear burn is a similar kind of thing, and it picks up the colours and the textures of the layer underneath, and so that can be used to tone down colours as well in an interesting way. I most often do that with greys and you know, sometimes blues or whatever. It depends what the main colour scheme is, but this is a nice way of this is something for me to bear in mind going forward with that as well. So let's have a look, do a little bit more. Excuse me. Changing weather, changing season. It is grey, it's lovely and deliciously cool, the air is. Let's have a look. Here's some of this lovely cinnamon. This cinnamon is one of my favourite colours in here, which is, it's surprising me. I definitely, my tastes in colour are really, really changing and altering as I age. And I never would have thought that I'd enjoy using such a muted or, you know, vintage colours, you know, the grungier colour palette. So this is and this is one of my favourites. I don't know why. It's not the name, I think it's just that it's such a lovely red brown. It's almost coppery in colour. And I'm coming from this from a chemist's point of view, a scientist's point of view, because when you heat copper up and you create different copper oxides, there are many, many different colours you can get. And also as pure copper metal's being heated up, you get a whole range of beautiful colours, including this sort of reddish tone. Especially when copper's just beginning to oxidise, it goes as sort of like reddish colour. But you get greens and blues and even magentas and purples. It's fantastic. And I think that's what this reminds me of. I really enjoyed inorganic chemistry. Chemistry is, you know, chemistry itself is split mainly into three parts. You've got organic chemistry, which is to do with the chemistry of carbon. You have physical chemistry, which is to do with, it's got lots of maths in it. And it's more to do with the laws of chemistry and the rates of chemical reactions and equilibrium and all kinds of things like that. And then you have inorganic chemistry, which is to do with all of the elements and their compounds, except really for carbon, although you do touch on carbon because obviously it is an element. But the lovely thing about inorganic chemistry is there's an awful lot of colours in it. And I'd have loved to have done inorganic chemistry for my degree, but there were never enough people wanting to do inorganic chemistry for the degree. So sadly it wasn't an option for me. But I have very fond memories of all the different colours, particularly of the transition metals. These are metals like titanium and manganese and others that sort of like lurk in the middle. I say lurk, they don't lurk, they live in the middle of the periodic table. And their compounds can have a huge range of colours, and you can change those colours with simple or fairly simple chemical reactions and see the change in them. And it's really interesting. And it's all related to quantum physics and, you know, atomic orbitals and all sorts of things. And that fascinated me because that's how I am. That's what I do. It's how I, yeah. Yeah, I could never do the maths of quantum physics, but I could understand, some of the theory, but the maths, oh my gosh. I'm finding it easier to learn Welsh than I am to learn maths, that kind. And that's the reason I'd never do inorganic or physical chemistry. That was never an option for me. Some people, I think, did do physical chemistry as an option for their degree, the final year of their degree. I didn't. I chose organic chemistry because I couldn't do inorganic, and no way was I going to do physical. And my other option was environmental pollution science, because my degree is in 2 subjects. And I knew I was going to be doing environmental pollution science from the get-go, really, from the first time I did the subject or did a unit in it, or perhaps even before then, when I saw the options of subjects I could take. It was, that's what I want to do. Back in the early 80s, people were aware of environmental concerns. I mean, we humans have been for a long time. Climate change was talked about in the 1900s. The effect of man's activity on the world, and particularly the burning of fossil fuels and the way it affected the environment. But it was in the 1960s, I suppose, where it really took off with the hippies and everything else. And I was born in the 1960s, and I was brought up with this conversation all the way around me. I don't remember so much of it being talked about in secondary school, but I certainly was always aware of this. And so in some ways it was quite natural for me to want to carry on looking into it. And I've always loved nature anyway, and it was a really interesting course to do. So I've got some very interesting seed pods and shapes here. I do want to make use of this. This is the most awkward thing, is putting things back together and pulling things apart again. The rest of it actually isn't too bad. It's but it does feel a bit potchy when you're getting one colour out and from another. And putting everything back together again. But it's the same for any kind of pen that you use. I think it's just that I'm eager to get on with what I'm doing, and I really don't necessarily want the potch. Potch is a word we use in Wales. I don't know if it's used on the area I'm in. I don't know whether it's used elsewhere in the UK, but it means sort of like it's a bit of a fuss, a bit of a bother, a bit of a potch, a bit awkward, a bit fussy to get on with. Mind you, having said that, potching around means something else. That can mean 2 things. Potching around is, just wandering around, just doing nothing much, just getting on with nothing in particular. But I have heard it, or it has used in the context of, I suppose, making out, I think is what you would say in America, for our Americans, which of course most of us are familiar with because of preponderance of such American television programs. So yeah, I've heard that, sort of like just messing about in terms of making out or whatever, nothing serious, we're just potching. Yeah, I don't know if it's used in that context anymore, but it certainly was when I was younger, a lot younger. So the way that language is used and the different ways that people say the same kind of thing is, and is interesting to me. I think it always has been. Language and the use of language and words is interesting. As is the history or the origin of words, how words have grown and developed and their use has changed, perhaps over time, where they've come from. And the study of words in this way is called etymology. Not to be confused with entomology, which is the study of bugs and insects. I think I've got an etymological dictionary here somewhere, which has a fairly limited number of words in it, but nonetheless it is really still interesting. And I will use, I think it's Etymology Online is the website, and that has a lot there, and I just find it so interesting. Much in the way that I find adding colour interesting to my drawings and so on, because that's when these begin to come to life. And I think one of the lessons I need to learn from this, from having some of the details smudged, is to get the bare bones down, add colour, and then go back and add detail, much the same as I do with embellishments. Now that isn't a very good job there, so what I will do is get my colourless blender out and just use it just to lighten some of those areas up. It doesn't blend in as much as it erases, or it does help to blend things out. So with this, what I try to do is I work with the colourless part of the blend here, and I go from side to side and try to do it that way, so I get a fairly even blend out from that colourless part. It's a bit of a potch, I suppose, but it's remembering how to do it and to actually do it. So that way I will get these getting too small really to blend. So I am going to fill them with pure colour. This one here, I do need a darker area at the bottom, but what I can do then is I'll get this, and on the ones that are really dark, let's just add some of that, there. And that will just help to bring them out. But again, as I'm likely to add white highlights there with a gel pen, that's not so important. There we are, I've added a bit more, and don't know what you think. Is the use of alcohol markers my colouring superpower? I don't know. Tell me what you think. Should I give up on watercolours? I'm beginning to think so. I've been using these. But what I'm going to say is thank you for joining me, because I'm going to go and lose myself in adding colour and music and uploading this video and getting social media done and what have you. And I'd like to say thank you for joining me. It's been a pleasure once again. And take care of yourselves, look after yourselves, find time to be creative. Take care now. Bye-bye.